If you're visiting, my name is Scott, and you're here as we finish a series of messages in a New Testament document called Acts. It's a historical narrative that narrates the first 30 years of the early church. Like from the resurrection of Christ in, let's just say, about 30 AD through about the early 60s. And right now in the narrative, we're in the last year where the chosen instrument of Jesus, the Apostle Paul, is being moved now from Caesarea, which is just outside of Jerusalem, it's on the coast, to Rome. And that was always the vision that Luke described in the early chapters of this historical narrative, that the message that Jesus is the hope of the world was going to move from Jerusalem to Rome. And now it is going to Rome. And the way it gets there is through a storm. And I captured this title and some of my application from Kurt Harlow. The title of this message is Riding Out the Storm. Riding Out a Storm. But I think, honestly, another title that really works, especially in light of vacation summer plans, is that there are travel plans that can change your life. There are great travel experiences that can change your life. So that's also an option for today. It's amazing how brutal the Mediterranean Sea can be. The Mediterranean, which was the center of the first century world. The Mediterranean, as we learned even last August, the Mediterranean can be pretty scary. On August the 17th, 2024, Mike Lynch, who is a brilliant coder, Mike had just completed a very long corporate lawsuit with Hewlett-Packard. And Mike and his financial team and business partners, his daughter, Hannah, and some of his business partners and their family got on his yacht. Now, he has an amazing yacht. It's called the Bayesian, and it's a very, very expensive yacht. It is actually equal in length to the very ship that the Apostle Paul is going to take with 273 other passengers. Equal in length. This is 184 feet in length, and the ship that the Apostle Paul was on was 180 feet. So Mike Lynch and his team is celebrating this long-term corporate victory that they had in court here in the U.S., as I recall. And they celebrate by getting on their yacht out of the Netherlands and coming all the way to the port of Sicily, Porticello of Sicily. And they placed their ship just 500 meters off the coast. And they spend the night there, and they got good living. They've got their own chef and a whole staff. But on this boat, there's only 22 people, very small boat. And this fisherman got up early in the morning. He got up early in the morning. He gets up there at 3:30. His name's Celofe. I think that's how you pronounce it in Italian. Celofe. We have Italians in the church, so I may have to consult them when I see them. But he got up and he saw something he'd never seen before as a fisherman at this very location in the Mediterranean. This is August. This is a little bit before the real hurricane, the real stormy season begins in the Mediterranean. This was the last picture taken from a restaurant at the port of Porticello. Can I get that next slide, please? This is the last picture. And this has just an enormous mast. And this rig is just there in this port. And this fisherman says, I saw something I've never seen before. He says, there was this tornado, this instant tornado that actually came down and struck the dock where he was working. And then it was rebuffed or repelled by that very dock. And it just kind of went straight for this yacht. Straight for the yacht. And the yacht was considered unsinkable. Some of you, anybody remember this story last August? The yacht was considered unsinkable. At 3:50 a.m., it was struck and the yacht was underwater in 1 minute time. There were 22 passengers on the yacht. Only 16 survived. This is the unpredictable nature of the Mediterranean Sea, right? If you have plans to cruise the Mediterranean this summer, I don't mean to take away from your plans at all, okay? But it's unpredictable. There are signs for the storms, but like you can't just assume that any slight northeaster is what they call it, or northeastern wind should be ignored. The context of the story we're looking at today is taking place later in the autumn, later beyond summer, beyond August. It's in early autumn. It's taking place in mid-September through late October. And the Apostle Paul is being transported with 200 plus other passengers to Rome. And I think the one thing that I left with in this passage that Kurt Harlow describes is this. Kurt's a Bayside pastor at Bayside Auburn. Is as it relates to storms, like storms come and we have little or no control over what's happening. Anybody relate? Little or no control. Storms come also when we may already be in a difficult season. It's like, I thought that was hard, and now it's gotten more difficult. And thirdly, storms are not difficult to spot if we're looking. So sometimes we're not paying attention and we can miss it. And then finally, storms have a very powerful, violent, frightening nature, but they are temporary. So there's hope in the midst of a storm. I think this text really matters today because there are some storm procedures that I think will really help you. And I can tell you personally, I went through a personal storm in the last probably month, right? Like Melissa's the only one that knows about this. And it doesn't relate to my job or my health, but a personal storm. And I practiced at least one of these procedures I'm going to introduce to you, and I'm telling you, it was game-changing for me. And here's the deal, I want to tell you about it. I didn't want to do it. No, my nature was like, no, just move forward, just do the first thing that comes to mind, and it'll all be okay, right? Yeah, I made a lot of bad decisions that way. So I had to really make this decision. And I think the overall decision, which I'll be repeating throughout the message today, is this. You've got to trust the master of the storm. You got to trust him enough to actually practice these important procedures when you're in the storm. And it kind of harkens back to the Apostle Paul's words when he said, during hardship, you got to keep your head on. You got to keep your head in the game. And I think it's going to work for you. I think this is going to have some good application for you. So let me just show you where we're at. So we're in the Mediterranean. Paul's in Caesarea, which was like the capital of Rome in Jerusalem, Judea area. He's appealed to Caesar. Remember, he was being cornered. He'd actually completed the 2 years of his legal statutes, and no one was able to bring an accusation against him from the Jewish party that could incarcerate him. The Romans never heard anything that was worth listening to. And so they offered to turn Paul over to the Jews, and Paul's like, thanks anyways, but no thanks. And because they wanted to kill him. They'd already put together some people to kill him. And so he said, I appeal to Caesar, and as a Roman citizen, he could do that. And so the king said, to Caesar you've appealed, to Caesar you will go. And so they start taking this smaller boat north here along the coast of Israel, and then up behind they call it the lee of Cyprus, and then along the coast here of what is called Asia Minor. This is modern day Turkey. And this is early to mid October are the dates from 58 to 61 AD. And I think you're going to see, you're going to get to watch the Apostle Paul manage a storm. I think you're going to learn some stuff in it, and you're going to walk away from some good procedures when the storm comes towards you. Sound good? Sound good? Here we go. Paul sails for Rome. When it was decided that we would sail for Italy, Paul and some other prisoners, thank you. When we get to the red, read with me. So he is a prisoner, and he's not the only prisoner. They were handed over to a centurion named Julius, who belonged to the imperial regiment. That means this guy had tremendous authority. He had the authority to actually commandeer any naval vessel in the Mediterranean under the authority of Caesar Augustus. Verse 2. We boarded a ship from, Adramyttium. By the way, just so you know, pastors practice these things. I listened to that. I practiced it. I don't even remember seeing the word before. So we boarded a ship from Adramyttium about to sail for ports along the coast of the province of Asia. And we put out to sea. Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica, was with us. Oh, I love this little reference. Why would you mention Aristarchus outside of the idea that it would be a great name to name your next firstborn son? Why would Luke do that? Here's why. Because Aristarchus is going to be referenced, and if you go to my manuscript, which is available, I think, in your programs, if Aristarchus is going to be referenced in Colossians as a fellow inmate of the Apostle Paul, a fellow prisoner. And he's also going to be referenced as a co-worker of the Apostle Paul. And I think what Luke is just trying to say is that God was providing Paul people, support in the midst of his journey. And I noticed like a Macedonian from Thessalonica, and then Luke writes, was with us. With us. Say that with me. With us. And the reason I wanted to talk about that for a moment here is to ask you, when the storm comes, who's your with us? Do you have some with us in your life? Do you have, and I'm talking about outside of maybe your spouse, do you have some people with you, like an Aristarchus and a Luke, who are there in the trenches? They're praying for you. They'll come visit you at the hospital. If they can tell maybe you're down a little bit, they'll check on you. How's it going? They're not weird, but they're with you. And if perhaps you end up, a man overboard or woman overboard, they're with you. They're not going to say, hey, take care. They're going to jump in after you, right? You want some with us people in your life, like Aristarchus, who will not just say, hey, prayers, but actually is praying for you. Okay. All right. The next day we landed at Sidon. This is up north, still along the coast. And Julius, in kindness to Paul, allowed him to, say it with me, go to his friends. This is big. If Paul were to get a wild hair and decide, you know what, I'm gonna escape and I'm gonna get out of this ship, I get seasick. And Paul has, as I'll mention here in a moment, has had a lot of sea excursions. But if he tried to escape and he was successful, do you know the cost for Julius of Paul's escape? Death. For any centurion that lost a prisoner, the consequence was death. So to let Paul have this kind of freedom tells me that the most influential first century Christian leader was someone you could trust, that a Roman centurion could trust. And someone you not only could trust, but someone who had really good people skills. As you'll see, Paul dialogue with the pilot, the owner of the ship, just really had some very good people skills. So he shows him the kindness to go to his friends. Here's the thing about Paul: hardworking, brilliant, had lots of friends. Be that kind of person. Do whatever you can to cultivate lots and lots of friends in your life, especially before a storm, which is about to happen. so that they might provide for his needs. Not sure what all of his needs are, maybe just in and out, just a quick stop by. Verse 4. From there, we put out to sea again and passed to the lee of Cyprus. I already referenced that. That's that edge of Cyprus, because the winds were against us. Okay, so this is not unusual this time of year. The winds aren't working with them. And by the way, just so you know, as God is leading your life, as just like he's leading Paul to Rome, there are times when the winds will be against you. And just smile and say, hey, the winds are against us. Doesn't mean he's not leading that direction. It just means it's not easy. Often we think that when the Lord's leading, it will be easy. It will be comfortable. We'll have leather behind us. And not necessarily. Not necessarily. Sometimes you got to go cloth. Verse 5. When we had sailed across the open sea of the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we landed at Myra in Lycia. There the centurion found an Alexandrian ship sailing for Italy and put us on board. I want to go forward and show you this ship. This is a replica, this ship, of what's called the HN Olympia. And this is considered very close to exactly what the Apostle Paul and eventually 273 other passengers were on for weeks upon weeks. Now, I don't know about you, but when I see a ship like that, I'm just guessing they don't have life preservers. They may have I think we'll discover they did have an extra boat that went along with it. I see a lot of oars there, which makes me feel like this is not a Viking cruise. Like you're gonna feel like maybe you're on a cruise, but you're also in a gym because you got a bunch of people that are rowing below you. And my guess is that they ran out of Axe deodorant pretty soon. And and there's not a lot of space. Like I know as someone who likes to get and be by himself, I can see myself up there hanging out occasionally or up here. There's not a lot of me time here, right? And so this is what Paul would be on. This is a grain ship that came out of Egypt. That's why it's called an Alexandrian ship. Let's go back and finish that text. So there the centurion found the Alexandrian ship sailing for Italy and put us on board. We made slow headway for many days and had difficulty arriving off Cnidus. And the way they would make headway is they'd have to zigzag in their sailing navigation. It was very frustrating. When the wind did not allow us to hold our course, we sailed to the lee off Crete, opposite of Salmone. We moved along the coast with difficulty and came to a place called Fair Havens near the town of Lycia. Okay, next scripture, please. Oh, by the way, this actually is a good image of an actual head front coming into the Mediterranean, a storm that is caused by the high winds and the heat and the cold all intersecting over the Mediterranean. Much time had been lost. And the reason time is significant is because the closer we get to November, the unnavigable the Mediterranean becomes. And sailing had already become dangerous because by now it was after the Day of Atonement. Now this particular year, the Day of Atonement was on October 5th. So you can get a sense that we're probably late October. So Paul warned. This is Paul's like storm procedure. Here's what he does. Men, I can see that our voyage is going to be disastrous. How many of you have a father that's like this? He'll just say, this is bad, right? Just me. Okay. So disastrous, and say it with me, bring great loss to the ship and cargo and to our own lives also. Look at how empathetic Paul is. He's not just talking about caring about souls. He's concerned about the owner's cargo, all the grain. He's concerned about the ship itself, which takes no doubt a long time to build. Super thoughtful, but he's like, this is concerning to me. Now, some of you might think, like I used to think, it's kind of like, Paul is a Hebrew Pharisee. He specialized in the Torah. He's not like trained in the art of seamanship, is he? Isn't he kind of stepping out of his box? Right? He's like, he knows the Torah by memory. Who says he knows anything about sailing? Right? Doesn't it get on your nerves sometimes when someone shouldn't know anything about a subject and all of a sudden they pipe out like they know something? Right? Not you. It bothers me. It bothers others when I do it. So here's the thing I want to tell you that's interesting about Paul. If you read 2 Corinthians 11, when he talks about his ministry, Paul says, I've actually been shipwrecked 3 times. Let that sink. Pun intended. Here's the point. It's not that he's an incredible navigator. It's that he's had 3 wrecks, 3 shipwrecks already in his life. Perhaps, I don't know exactly. He's kind of sensitive, you know. He didn't want to do this again. And sometimes you speak up just because, no, I don't know that much about the subject, but I'm a survivor of shipwrecks. And I'd prefer not to do that again. So he speaks up. Since the harbor was unsuitable to winter, which I'm like, figure out a way to do it. Here's the genius. Oh, wait, I went too fast. Verse 11. But the centurion, instead of listening to what Paul said, followed the advice of the pilot and the owner of the ship. Okay? And why he didn't listen to Paul, who knows? Maybe a prejudice. He's a Jew. He's not a Greek. Maybe he's a Pharisee, not a maritime student. I don't know. Verse 12. Since the harbor was unsuitable to winter in, the majority decided, oh, there's a good decision for you, that we should sail on, and hoping to reach Phoenix and winter there. Like, this was a harbor in Crete facing both southwest and northeast. And let me show you this harbor. So this is where they're at. So they were going along the coast of Turkey, and then the winds picked up. They were not able to continue, and they ended up going down here to Crete, and they land at this harbor of Fair Havens, and their whole goal in late October, early November is just to get to Phoenix, just to get on the other side of the island, because that harbor faces the correct direction so that the ship could stay there for winter. Like, by the way, this is like more than like having a canceled flight, right? Okay, where you have to spend the night in Denver or Chicago or Dallas-Fort Worth. This is being on a crew with over 200 people. You're going to spend winter with them. Winter in the terminal with a bunch of people you don't know. That's what I'm talking about. And the Apostle Paul, he tells them this is not a good idea. They say, we're going to just try to make it to Phoenix. We just need to go a little bit more. And the majority thought that was a great idea. Let's do it. And they had hope. Did you see that? They had hope. They had positivity going for them. Keep it positive, thinking that everything would just work out well. Well, it doesn't. It doesn't work out well. You know, sometimes we get into stormy seasons and we feel like we need to speak our mind. We need to say something. And I'm going to talk about how you should. Sometimes we get in stormy seasons and we think that everything should just be comfortable and easy for us. I'm taking some classes right now, 2 small classes, and yet I feel like they're keeping me busier than 1 full-time class. And I mean, just so fast, so much, so fast. And I can kind of complain a little bit to myself and to my wife. And sometimes, like, we tend to, like, just go along with what the majority says. And sometimes the majority's not right. What do we do when we're on a team at work, or we're maybe in an extended family situation, or even in a political experience like we have now? What do we do when the majority seems to be going one way, and personally we're like, oh, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Not that that's relevant at all today, but I think there's 3 procedures here that will really help you. Can I share them with you? Here we go. I think the first thing is you got to start with trusting the master of the storm. And the way you trust the master of the storm is first by accepting the season that you're in. You just accept it. Paul said that the winds were against us. And how do you like just accept, okay, this is the medical storm I'm in, this is the marriage and family life storm I'm in. How do you accept it? Here's how you do it. You talk to God more than you talk to others about it. It's really easy to spend a lot of time talking to others about your storm. I got lots of problems. I got a problem with him. I got a problem with her. I got a problem with that. But we spend more of our words talking to others instead of talking to him. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't have somebody that you can go and kind of say, hey, you know what? I'm frustrated by this, right? And in my own home, my wife and I will give one another permission to express a frustration. God, I heard the frustration. That was good. That's all you get. That was your last comment or complaint on that issue. We're done talking about it. At least she is. I tend to want to prolong the frustration. But the more you talk about it, the more you have to hear yourself talk about it. And it kind of informs your whole body and soul and psyche, and all of a sudden you're angry again because you keep talking about it. Because when you talk about it, you hear yourself talk about it. That's the genius of talking out loud, is that as it comes out, it goes back in this ear. And then it goes back into all your synapses, and your synapses tell your body you don't like what you're talking about, and you get frustrated and anxious and depressed. And so you got to stop talking. You got to talk to him more about it than you talk to others about it. And if you read the Psalms, you'll see that David and Asaph and Solomon and Joseph, who's even recorded in the Psalms, and Moses, like, they expressed their frustration to the Lord, and you have full permission to do that, right? First, accept the season you're in. How do you do that? Talk to God more than you talk to others. Number 2, trust the master of the storm and control what you can control. How many like control? Anybody? Yeah. How did Paul manage this? How did Paul do this? He spoke up. He spoke up. I think he's a real model here on how to speak up. When you speak up, how do you know when to speak up? And I would say that it's threefold, and I get this from Kurt Harlow as well. When you speak up, you should speak up when there's danger. Speak up. Speak up. We were boarding a plane out of Dallas-Fort Worth at 11:30 at night the other day, and there was a team in the terminal that was being very cantankerous with one of the employees, like super, the coach himself, super volatile. And I'm like, wow, that's too much, right? And they're getting on the plane I'm going on, and it's 11:30, and I want to go to sleep. And how long is this going to carry on? And it kept going and kept going. And there were young people on the team. And my wife works with young people, and she was ready to just unleash on this situation. And I'm like, no, it is too late. It's too late. We need to let somebody else handle that. So we didn't address it. And I said, I don't want you to say anything. She agreed. So when we got on the plane, I told the attendant, hey, there's a coach out there that's super angry. It's coming on our plane. I think you just need to be aware of that. And he said, okay, thank you. And then we went to sit down, and my wife said, I thought we weren't talking about that anymore. And I said, no, I wanted you to not talk about it. I was willing to talk about it. She just has a different way of addressing issues. But I honestly felt like you just need to be aware. If we're going to have a problem here on the flight, let's be aware of it before we even take off. Let's address it. You got to speak up, because I was a little concerned that, that I was going to have to, I don't know, I'd end up in a dangerous situation. So, speak up when there's danger. Number 2, speak up when others are defenseless. Speak up when others are defenseless. And then number 3, speak up when the Spirit prompts you to speak up. And I like what Bob Goff says about this. When the Spirit prompts you to speak up, he doesn't say it exactly like this, but he says, like, typically you want to go with not the first thing you feel like you should say, but maybe the second or third. Because sometimes you need to edit what you're going to say before you say it. And sometimes you'll hear people say, hey, this just came to my mind. I got to share it with you. You're like, don't do it. Process it a little bit, right? Process a little bit. So, if you're going to control what you can control, I told you like when to speak up. Here's what I want to talk to you about for just a second. I want to make certain that the way you do this is you make certain you talk to the right person or persons. Now, I think if you look at the context here, that Paul's talking to the pilot and the owner and the imperial regiment centurion. He's talking to the right person. He's complaining up. You want to complain up. Talk to the right person. Don't complain down. Talk to the right person, and usually that will be a difficult conversation. And I shared with you earlier in the message that like I had a storm in the last month, and like I felt prompted. There was a person I felt like I should reach out to, and I did, and he gave me brilliant advice, and it completely changed the storm, just like that. It's fantastic. I'm so grateful that I did even what I didn't want to do, which was to talk to the right person. And sometimes it's easier to talk to people who will tell you what you want to hear, who will tell you, yes, you're so skinny, it's ridiculous. Or yes, they'll tell you, yes, you're such a high performer. We can't even keep you. Like, you're amazing, right? No, you need someone who will give you a little reality check, right? Talk to the right person. Very important. Number 3. Trust the master of the storm and beware of groupthink. Beware of groupthink. What is groupthink? Groupthink is when harmony is more important than honesty. Groupthink is when there's an elephant in the room and no one wants to talk about it. Beware of groupthink. Since the harbor was unsustainable to enter in, the majority decided that we should just sail on, hoping. That's groupthink. The truth, even when very obvious, can be hard to accept. We're riddled with insecurities and what James called the battles within that give us the ability to deny even the most obvious signs. And Kurt says this, freedom is the ability to see a storm coming. There's a storm coming, and oh my goodness, it's going to be overwhelming. So if groupthink has taken over your cruise, your team at work, your family, what do you do in the meantime? You're stuck. Paul's stuck with these 200 passengers for the winter. Did you hear that? The winter. This isn't like I get to go to work at 5 and reset. No. You'll be with these people for the winter. What do you do in the meantime? Like, you're spending winter with these people. What's going to bring you the most joy? Let me tell you what it is. I call it, and in the meantime. Use the time and the season to rest. Take your Dramamine. Like a lot of these folks ended up getting rest. And use the time to bless. And we use this acronym around here all the time. Like, begin each day with prayer. Listen to your friends and family and your new neighbors. And eat with them. They were going to eat together on this ship and serve them. And when you get a chance, share the Jesus story. Here's my point. I actually think God is the one that is the master of this whole storm. And he's the one that has put the Apostle Paul on this ship with 273 other passengers. And part of the reason is so that Paul can share the gospel with all these people. And so can Aristarchus and so can Luke. And so sometimes your best work is happening during a storm. Sometimes your readiness to share the hope that you have in Jesus is during a storm. And God can use you tremendously to influence others and to bring them eternal life by your willingness to bless and rest. Travel, one author says, travel often pulls people away from the pressures, lets them get a fresh perspective in their lives, forces them to face and surmount fears or discomforts, and enables them to experience rejuvenation that comes from times of relaxation. It's also a time to bless people. It's also a time to share the gospel. So what do we really need to know about the storm? Do you remember that passage where it says that there was a day when evening came where Jesus said to his disciples, let's go over to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And leaving the crowd behind, they took him along, just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern. What was he doing? Sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him up and they said, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" I mean, can you see these grown men doing this? I can. He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified, and they asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." I'll tell you who he is. He's the master of the storm. And you can trust him as the master of the storm. You can trust him by demonstrating you're willing to talk to him more than talk to others. You can trust him by a willingness to talk to the right people during your storm. And you can trust him by using your storm and season to rest if necessary. It's very important. And to bless all those that God's put on your ship, on your team, in your neighborhood. Because the most important thing is that we're sharing the gospel message and that we're growing in Christ-likeness and godliness. That's how we ride out the storm. This is how travel can be a life-changing experience. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for the opportunity to see in your word, your plan in the midst of a storm. Help us have your perspective about our storms. Help us trust that you're the master of the storm. And I ask right now that if there's anyone here who needs you to help quiet the storm in their life, that you would prompt them today to say, "Jesus, please bring some calmness to this storm." Right now, if that's you, I invite you just to say, "Jesus, please bring some calmness to this storm." This storm in as it relates to my medical issues, this storm as it relates maybe to a family issue, this storm as it relates to work, the storm as it relates to marriage. God, bring calmness to it. And if you're here and you've never trusted in Jesus personally as your master and Lord, I invite you right from where you're seated to just say, "Jesus, I want you to be the master of my life. I trust you. I believe you died for my sins, that you were buried and resurrected from the dead." And if that's your prayer, boy, I pray that you'll come tell someone today. In Jesus' name, amen.